everyone. If you are watching this video, you are either a pre-medical medical student who has the fear of not matching in the future, or you are a current medical student who has went through the unfortunate reality that happens to a lot of us of not matching into residency. My name is Dr. Danielle Ward. I am currently a plastic surgery resident physician, but I was one of those unfortunate few who did not match as a medical student. And then I had the misfortune of not matching as a graduate more than once, but finally matched on my third full cycle into a categorical integrated plastic surgery resident physician. So this video will just be to show you that it's possible. You know, your dreams are not over. Keep pushing, and I'm just going to share my story of not matching because I think it's very important that we share these things. A lot of times you see physicians make it through in whatever specialty and they don't tell you these struggles of not matching. So this is my way of being transparent and sharing with everyone my story. So it has been almost exactly 5 years since the first time I did not match as a fourth year graduating medical student. For those of you who don't know, I'm an osteopathic physician, a DO, and back when I was a medical student, there wasn't the DO and MD residency merger. So as a DO, our residency match was in February, and then March was the MD match, which also DO students applied to as well. So 5 years ago, February 2018, it was match day. I was on my way to I believe I was on an internal medicine rotation at the time. Leave the house around 8 a.m. I'm stopped at a stoplight, and match day results came via email, which I thought would come later in the day, but they actually came that morning as I was driving to the rotation. I remember I was not too far from the house. It's like, let me just go ahead and check to see. And that's when I received that fateful email that said, you did not match. You know, I was devastated. I stopped everything, turned the car around, let my attending know I would not be in, went straight home. First thing I do when I get home, I call my school. I'm like, what do I do? I don't know what to do about the situation. So as a DO, back when we didn't match, there was a thing called the scramble, where the list of unfilled programs would be released at a certain time, and then you would spend the entire day calling those programs and interviewing to get a spot. So when I called the school, they were like, just calm down. The programs won't be released until 11 a.m. Once that gets released, you can start calling. So at this point, like I said, I'm devastated. I just wanted to crawl into a corner and just be in a ball and just not be bothered with anyone. You have that feeling that, life is over, you work so hard, and then what are you gonna do with your life? So, I was lucky. I remember that I had a friend who was a current surgery resident who hadn't matched previously, so called him up. I was just like, I don't know what to do. Can you give me advice? Best thing I ever did. So, he calmed me down, and the advice he gave was, to take an hour, cry it out, be in my feelings, and then after that, suck it up, take the depression out of my voice, look at that list, and start making phone calls. So that's what I did. That day, the list came out. I believe there were 2 categorical, just general surgery positions available. A lot of family medicine, internal medicine, a ton of what we call traditional rotating internships positions. So, in my heart, I wanted to be a surgeon. That's my passion. So I couldn't apply to anything but that. So I applied to the categorical surgery positions, but I also applied to the internships that were surgery based, that you can form them to be that. And I remember spending the day just calling up programs, being on hold for them to call me back, and interviewing by phone. And it was the most stressful thing ever. You're on the spot, you don't have time to prepare for an interview. You're talking to them, and then a lot of the programs would offer a contract on the spot, but you would have to sign it Like they gave like, you have 5 hours to make a decision about moving across the country to be in this facility. And it wouldn't even be, you know, general surgery. It would be just the regular internship. So there was a lot of pressure. But my home program based up north, because I was a satellite school, they did take the time to say, hey, we'll give you about 48 hours to think about it. So that's the contract that I eventually ended up taking. So it was a traditional rotating internship, but on my initial interview, I did ask, you know, can I at least have 9 to 10 months of surgery? Surgery is my passion. I want to make sure that I'm surgically oriented, and the program director was willing to work with me so that I could have those months of surgery and still make myself competitive for when I eventually would have to re-enter into the match again. So it worked out that day for me. It doesn't, like I said, we don't have the DO, MD separate matches anymore. I actually, as an aside, I was in the MD match. I did have interviews, and I did rank programs for the MD match that would have taken place in March. But my thought process was, you know, if none of these DO programs want me and I'm a DO, why would I risk waiting until March to see if I match into these programs? My daughter, you know, I have a mouth to feed. I couldn't take a risk like that. So for me, it was crucial that I took something because I needed to make money. I needed to get my training. I just didn't want to think about it. So we'll never know if I would have ended up matching in March. But the thing with the MD matches and how we all have it now is if you don't match, there's a SOAP process with rounds, and it's actually way harder to match in that than if you're, you know, able to call programs as a DO. Now through the SOAP process, you can't call programs, you just wait, submit your application, so it's a lot harder. So while things worked out, that process, I wouldn't wish it on anyone in the world. It's hard for people to understand what it feels like to not match when you've put in the work, you've done everything, you think you're a competitive applicant, and then it just doesn't go your way. When I look back and I think, you know, why didn't I match? I would say one of the major reasons was money. You know, as a fourth-year medical student, barely making it living off of student loans, I just couldn't afford to apply to the amount of programs that I was able to apply to eventually when I became the plastic surgery resident that I am now. I mean, back then I think I spent maybe $1,200 or so, whereas this time I spent $10,000. Not recommending that people spend as much, but as a graduate, which I'll get into in subsequent videos, I had to spend the money. But it wasn't about being a bad student per se. You know, I was student DO of the year of my school. I received, you know, top awards. I was national president of a major organization. So it wasn't like I wasn't a good and competitive applicant. But there's lots of factors that roll into not matching, and programs often get hundreds and hundreds of applications. So, you know, unfortunately they have to filter out somehow. So, you know, like I said, I'll never know if I would have matched in March. I couldn't take the risk, but that first time, you know, fortunately for me, things did work out. But like I say, that's one time, still to this day, 5 years later, it's still hard to think about because, you know, it's just everything you worked for just feels like it's crashing down. So for anyone who, you know, is going through it or has went through it, you know, I feel your pain. I'm there with you, and, you know, proof that it does get better. So we'll go into the next segment where I talk about my other match processes. Okay, so this is the part where we fast forward to when I didn't match the second and the third time. So fast forward to 2019, I am now an intern on a very busy general surgery service. Like I mentioned before, I was in a traditional rotating internship that was very general surgery heavy. And at this point, it's still when the DO and MD matches are separate. So I participated in the February match, which would have been the second time that I did not match. And what's most interesting about this one is I had actually been meeting with the general surgery program director of the institution quite regularly. We had had a talk. He told me that, you know, I wasn't in a top 6, but top 20 when we discussed the possibility of me matching. They took 6 a year, so that's why that's significant. But then when the February match came around, the program actually had 2 unfilled spots. So basically, all the discussion, out of all that, they basically never ranked me to begin with. So I say that to say, for medical students currently going through the match, do not listen to these programs when they send you gifts and say that you're their number 1 or anything of that sort, because they lie, because they want to fill their numbers. But needless to say, I was livid. I still have feelings about that, so I won't discuss any more about that situation. But the third time I didn't match was going into that March when I was in the MD match. And I knew I wouldn't match because a lot of the programs I had interviewed at weren't participating in the main residency match cycle. And then the one that was actually had called me a few days prior, like the week before, to let me know that they weren't going to consider me. So I knew I would get the "you did not match" email and have to go through the SOAP process on the MD side. The interesting thing about that day was, you know, like I said, I'm on a busy surgery service, so I'm getting to work at 5 a.m., still rounding on my patients, still writing notes. Actually had to cover a mastectomy case that day. The "you did not match" email never came, but I knew it was coming. And so, you know, I waited till 10 or 11 a.m. that morning. You know, I let my senior residents know the situation. There was another prelim surgery resident who was going through the same thing, so it was comforting to have someone going through that, although it was unfortunate. And waited for the list of unfilled positions. And the way this worked was, instead of a scramble where you call the programs, there's this process called the SOAPing process. This is where you get a list of all the unfilled programs in the country, and then you're allowed an allotment of about 45 programs to apply to, and then you submit your application. You're not allowed to call these programs, and you wait for them to call you, interview you, and then there's multiple rounds, so it happens over a few days. So on my end, you know, that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I don't remember, it's been a few years now, it was radio silence, and that's when I knew I had not matched into anything. So of course the devastation happens again. I remember, it was interesting, I remember the last case I had that evening, and I might have even been on a 24-hour call shift at that time because it was pretty late, but it was a lap chole, a gallbladder removal, and I remember I was, you know, telling the attending, I gotta stay by my phone. He was like, it won't take longer than 45 minutes, we got this. So I went to assist with that case, but it's just, it's interesting when you're expected to work and still function as a physician, but then your inner world is crumbling down because you just went unmatched and your future is uncertain. So that was another blow that I went through a second and third time. But, you know, at the time, I did have a backup plan. I had been thinking, what happens if I don't match? And it was at this time that I decided I would get my license and start practicing. And that's something a lot of medical schools don't tell you, is that after you've completed at least an intern year, after you've graduated from medical school and you've passed all 3 of your board exams, and I had taken my medical licensing, my final level 3 board exam, I had taken that in December. So I was actually eligible to get my license. And so my plan was to just get my license, start practicing. I mean, you can open up your own practice. I was lucky enough to get urgent care, but at least I did have that solid backup plan. And so my next segment will go into how I navigated life as a licensed physician working, still applying the programs, and then eventually matching. But unfortunately, I had to go through it a few more times before I got to that point. Okay, so now we fast forward to 2020. At this point, I am a working active urgent care physician. I had obtained my medical license in July of 2019 and immediately started working urgent care in August. So I've been working at this time. I've been actively applying the programs. off the match cycle. So every time I saw a residency position open up, like I said, I followed the Association of Program Directors in Surgery website, the plastic surgery website. Every time I saw an opening, I actually had what was a 45-page application that I submitted. It had my headshot, it had my CV, it had my board scores, it had my certifications, it had my case logs, anything that I could think of to help me match into a program. I was submitting that throughout the year. So 2020, I didn't re-enter the official match at this time, but I was actively applying to programs whenever they popped up, just kept doing it. And this was pretty much the case for the majority of the 2 years that I was an urgent care physician. But then for the 2021 cycle, I decided to go all in and apply to the match again. So this time, I knew I was all in. I'm already a graduate of medical school. I've been a couple years out of medical school. My chances are very low of matching. So it was very important for me to apply to as many programs as possible. And given that I was all in at this point, my dream has always been to be a plastic surgeon. I was just like, why not? So I applied to every single plastic surgery and pretty much every single general surgery program. I didn't apply to my previous program because I still had some feelings about that. And I didn't apply to a couple of the 7-year programs in general surgery just because, you know, it was like, listen, I'm getting close to the age of 40. I don't want to deal with that. But in total, it was like 360 something programs that I applied to. It's on my blog, so I have to find the original post where I documented everything because that's how I remember what happened. I shut a lot of things out my mind, but over 350 programs I applied to, and I remember I received 2 interviews total, but it was very interesting. I received 1 interview through the regular plastic surgery process, and it was actually a program that I had previously interviewed at for a 2nd-year position in plastic surgery, and it was before the pandemic, so I'd actually flown there, met the residents, interviewed in person, but I think they went with someone from Harvard, which was fine. Everyone I met was great. But they did re-interview me again when I entered the match for a 1st-year position. So I went in feeling pretty confident about that program. And then it was actually in January during my birthday. Every year I try to take a trip for my birthday. So I remember being in St. Lucia, and a good friend of mine sends me a screenshot of a program that was starting a new plastic surgery program and needed applicants in plastic surgery. So of course I was all on it, you know. So I was out of the country at the time, didn't have my laptop, but as soon as I got back home, I submitted everything. And then I remember interviewing with that program. I think my interview date was March 3rd. It was a day where the date of my interview, 9 p.m. was the last time to certify my list for the actual match. So I remember it was pushing it because my interview was in the afternoon. But you know, I just prayed about it. I went into the interview confident. I really enjoyed it. And then when match day Monday came around, I found out I matched. So it was a joyous day after going through, you know, 3 previous match cycles unmatched, and then weekly rejections over years of just not matching into programs. It was a beautiful, emotional, joyous feeling. So I knew I was going to be a plastic surgeon. I didn't know where I would be, just because I had the 2 programs out of 350 plus. I had 2 programs, both plastic surgery, go figure. But then when that Friday came around, I found out that I would be in my current program, and I was through the roof. It was one of the best days of my life. Like, I didn't even think I would end up here, like in Miami, plastic surgery. I was like, whatever, it will never happen. But here I am. So yeah, it's been a wild journey, and this was the really condensed version of my match story. If you want to read the full match story in detail, I'll try to link to my blog post below, just because I wrote those posts right as it was very fresh. So all the details are there, whereas now I'm years out. I've had time to vary a few items. But in general, I'm happy to be where I'm at. Not a day goes by that I don't wake up thanking God that I'm in this position. And it's funny because originally as a DO, I didn't think that plastic surgery straight out of med school would be an option. I thought I would have to do the 5 years of general surgery and then the 3 years of plastic surgery fellowship. So even though I was out and I was practicing for a few years, it actually worked out to where I'm on the same timeline as if I would have graduated medical school and went straight into residency as a general surgery residency and then did a 3-year fellowship. I will be ending at the exact same time. So it just goes to show that everything works out eventually. But what I do want to say is, you know, there were a lot of things that helped me get through the process, and I'll make that a separate video because I know this one's already long. But I want to say, like, to anyone who's going through the match, or even now it's January, so at this point, if you're a medical student, you don't have a lot of interviews, it's not looking promising, you know, I want my story to, you know, be there to show you that it is possible. It might not happen when you want it to be. You might have to pivot a little bit, change plans, but not the overall big plan. But things do eventually work out, and sometimes it's for the better. And so hopefully my story can help inspire, because, you know, I know the pain. I know how hard it is to not go through that, to not be able to match. I know the pain of that. And so, you know, I'm always here if anyone wants to reach out. Like I've had my blog and people email me or send me DMs on Instagram throughout the years, and I'm always happy to help, because it's hard to understand it if you're not going through it, but I am someone who understands it, so feel free to reach out to me. But my next post will be how I managed to get through. People always ask me, you know, how did you manage to keep your positive spirit and keep pushing despite all these rejections? And so that will be a separate post. And then if there's anything else you guys want to know, I might do a post about, you know, how I got my license and options for those who, if you don't match, how do you get your license, or what are your options once you're licensed? So stick around, make sure you hit that subscribe button if you want to see more, and I look forward to sharing my story with you. And thanks for watching.